The rain had begun just as the city lights flickered on, washing Pretoria in a cold, silvery haze. For most, it was just another stormy night. But for Jonathan Webber, South Africa's most controversial politician, it was the beginning of the end. Inside his sprawling Hillcrest estate, Webber sat alone in his study, the faint glow of a desk lamp illuminating the sea of documents scattered across the polished mahogany. Newspapers, court briefs, and private letters were stacked in haphazard piles, evidence of a life spent walking the razor's edge between political ambition and public scandal. He had enemies, of that he was certain. But tonight, he wasn't thinking about his adversaries outside these walls. He was thinking about the threat that had crept silently into his life from a place he would have never suspected, someone close. A soft knock at the door startled him. He hadn't expected visitors at this late hour. "Come in," he said cautiously. The door creaked open, revealing his longtime aide, Peter van der Merwe, a man with a reputation for loyalty and secrets. Peter's eyes were sharper than usual, darting nervously around the room. "Sir, it's urgent," Peter whispered, closing the door behind him. "There are people at the Parliament asking questions. About your recent dealings with, well, you know who." Webber's fingers tightened around his pen. He had been warned that the investigation into the land reform bill had been heating up, with whispers of corruption, secret offshore accounts, and misappropriated government funds. But Webber had always believed he could navigate these storms. Until tonight. "Who exactly?" he asked, his voice calm but edged with steel. "Minister Clausen," Peter said, lowering his voice further. "He's demanding a full report on your recent contracts with foreign investors. And, there's talk that some members want your resignation. Immediately." Webber leaned back in his chair, letting the tension roll off him like water. He had been in political fights before, survived scandals that should have ended his career, and faced opponents who would have killed him figuratively, if not literally. Yet a strange chill ran down his spine, as if the air itself was warning him that this storm was different. At that moment, his phone buzzed on the desk. He glanced at the screen. An unknown number. Against his better judgment, he answered. "Jonathan Webber?" a disguised voice hissed. "Yes, who is this?" Webber's instinct screamed danger. "Tonight, everything ends," the voice said before the line went dead. Webber's pulse raced. He wasn't afraid of political enemies. He was afraid of people who knew too much, and weren't afraid to act. The rest of the night passed in a blur. He double-checked the locks on his doors, peered through the blinds at the empty driveway, and called his security team, only to find their lines mysteriously dead. Every precaution felt inadequate. Every shadow in the house seemed to stretch longer, darker. And then he heard it, the faintest scrape of shoes on the marble floor, deliberate, silent, chilling. Before he could react, a figure emerged from the shadows. Tall, broad, wearing a dark jacket. Webber's heart pounded against his ribs as he instinctively reached for the drawer where he kept his handgun. But it was too late. A cold hand clamped over his mouth, muffling his scream. The last thing he saw was the glint of a blade in the dim light, and the unmistakable betrayal in a familiar voice. Outside, the storm raged on, washing away tire tracks, footprints, and the first hints of a crime that would shock the nation. By dawn, Jonathan Webber's body would be found in his study, sprawled across the floor, a single bullet wound in his chest, and a note pinned to his suit jacket, "Truth has its price." The news hit the headlines within hours. South Africans were stunned. Webber had been a polarizing figure, a man who demanded both love and hatred in equal measure. His death was more than just a tragedy, it was a scandal that promised to shake the very foundations of the government. Speculation ran rampant. Was it a political assassination? A personal vendetta? Or perhaps something more sinister, an inside job orchestrated by someone Webber trusted implicitly? Among the first to arrive at the crime scene was Detective Sarah Nkosi, a seasoned investigator known for her unorthodox methods and relentless pursuit of the truth. She crouched over the body, eyes scanning the room. "This isn't just a murder," she muttered under her breath. "This is a message." And she was right. Every detail, the precision of the attack, the timing, the cryptic note, spoke of someone who wanted the world to notice. Across the city, whispers of corruption, betrayal, and conspiracy began to take shape. High-ranking officials called emergency meetings behind closed doors. Journalists scrambled for leads. Citizens speculated, debated, and feared. But one question lingered above all others. Who killed Jonathan Webber? And more importantly, why did they do it? Little did the public know, the truth would not only expose the darkest corners of South African politics but also reveal that Jonathan Webber's death was just the tip of a much larger iceberg, a scandal that would implicate powerful figures, betrayals among friends, and secrets that some would kill to protect. As dawn broke over Pretoria, Detective Nkosi made a silent vow. She would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. But she had no idea how deep the rabbit hole went, or how close she was to being drawn into a world of lies, murder, and political treachery that would shock the nation to its core. And somewhere in the shadows, someone was watching. Waiting. Smiling. The murder of Jonathan Webber was just the beginning. The morning sun cut through the gray clouds over Pretoria, casting a pale light on Jonathan Webber's Hillcrest estate. Police tape fluttered in the wind, a stark barrier between a world of normalcy and the nightmare that had unfolded within. The news cameras were already swarming, their lenses hungry for blood, scandal, and sound bites. But inside the mansion, Detective Sarah Nkosi's mind was focused on only one thing: the people who might have killed Jonathan Webber, and why. Webber's body had been removed hours earlier, leaving the study almost eerily pristine. Yet the note pinned to his chest, scrawled in bold letters, haunted her: truth has its price. Sarah had been investigating high-profile murders for over a decade, but there was something different about this case. Webber was controversial, yes, polarizing, yes, but there was a pattern emerging in the chaos, one that suggested the killer was not random, and certainly not an amateur. Her first step was to meet the people closest to Webber, the ones who could have held motives, grudges, or secrets that might explain the assassination. First on the list was Peter van der Merwe, Webber's longtime aide. Peter had been at Webber's side for years, managing schedules, filtering enemies, and handling sensitive political matters that would make even the hardiest journalist shiver. Sarah found him pacing in the kitchen, his hands shaking as he muttered to himself. "Detective Nkosi," he greeted, attempting a shaky smile. I don't know what happened. One moment he was alive, and the next, his voice broke, trailing into silence. "Mr. van der Merwe, I need to know everything," Sarah said firmly. "Who would want Jonathan Webber dead?" Peter swallowed hard, avoiding her gaze. "Everyone and no one," he said finally. He was complicated. He had allies, enemies, friends, family, and some who pretended to be friends. You'd be surprised who hated him, detective. Sometimes, it was the people you trust most. Sarah noted the hesitation in his voice. She had learned long ago that in cases like this, hesitation often masked more than just grief, it masked guilt, fear, or knowledge someone didn't want revealed. Next, she turned to Webber's family. His wife, Eliza Webber, was a picture of composed grief. Tall, elegant, and unflinching in public, she sat quietly in the sitting room, fingers interlaced, eyes distant. "Detective Nkosi, thank you for coming," Eliza said softly. I don't understand. Jonathan had enemies, yes, but murder? Here? In our home?" He was careful. Too careful for this to happen. "Mrs. Webber, did your husband have any recent conflicts, political, financial, or personal?" Sarah asked. Eliza hesitated, then shook her head. "He had a few disagreements, but nothing that could lead to this." Her eyes, however, betrayed another story, a secret worry, a hidden fear. Sarah made a mental note to return to her later. Often, grief and composure were shields that hid more than they revealed. But it was when Sarah questioned Webber's political rivals that the web of secrets began to thicken. Minister Clausen, the stern-faced politician who had publicly challenged Webber's policies, seemed almost too calm. Jonathan was a threat, Clausen admitted, his voice measured. A brilliant man, but reckless. If he had continued unchecked, he could have destabilized the government. But murder? That's not my way. I prefer the courts, not the shadows. Sarah didn't believe him. Not fully. Clausen had motive, opportunity, and influence, the kind of power that could orchestrate events from behind closed doors. She also discovered that Webber had recently clashed with a young, ambitious MP, Damien Liu, who had accused him of covering up questionable deals with foreign investors. Damien had been vocal, aggressive even, in the weeks leading up to Webber's death. He had publicly vowed to expose every hidden deal of Webber's, and in doing so, he had made himself a visible target for both political backlash and possible retaliation. But as Sarah dug deeper, she realized something chilling. It wasn't just rivals outside the house who had motives. It was inside the house too. Peter's nervous demeanor, Eliza's distant gaze, and even the quiet house staff, all had secrets they were hiding. Sarah returned to the crime scene, walking slowly through the study. Every detail, every object, was significant. A cup of half-drunk tea sat on the corner of the desk. Papers were slightly shifted, as if someone had rifled through them in a hurry, or searched for something specific. And then she noticed it, a faint smudge on the edge of the note. Not fingerprints, something else. A residue. Something familiar yet oddly out of place. Sarah bagged it carefully, suspecting it might lead her to the killer, or at least to a clue that would shake the entire investigation. Meanwhile, across the city, whispers of scandal were already growing. Journalists had begun connecting dots: foreign investors, secret offshore accounts, and mysterious disappearances of government funds. It wasn't long before people started talking about who truly benefited from Weber's death. Sarah realized the puzzle was far larger than a simple political feud. Weber had lived in a world of secrets, a delicate dance between loyalty and betrayal, and it seemed someone had finally decided that the price of his truth was far too high to pay. And then came the first bombshell. A call from an anonymous source led Sarah to a dimly lit parking garage in downtown Pretoria. There, a figure stepped out of the shadows. The voice was low, urgent. "Detective Nkosi, if you want to know who killed Weber, you need to look where no one is willing to see. Start with the people closest to him, the ones who smile in public, but hide knives behind their backs." Before she could ask a single question, the figure disappeared, leaving only a folded envelope. Inside were photographs, some of Weber meeting with foreign investors in secret, others of him arguing fiercely with people who, until now, had seemed innocent. But one photo sent a chill through her spine. It was taken inside the Hillcrest estate. Someone had been inside the house before the murder. Someone who knew the layout intimately. Sarah's mind raced. The suspects were multiplying: political rivals, business partners, and even family. The deeper she dug, the murkier the waters became. And one thought hit her harder than any revelation. Jonathan Weber's murder wasn't just about politics. It was personal. Someone he trusted had betrayed him. Someone had planned every detail, every move, with cold precision. And that person was still out there. As the day faded into evening, Sarah sat in her office, piecing together the fragments of the puzzle. The names, the faces, the hidden agendas, they all pointed to one terrifying conclusion: the truth was far more scandalous than anyone could imagine, and it threatened to expose not just a murderer, but a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of power. And as she stared at the photos spread across her desk, one question haunted her mind. Could she find the killer before they struck again, or was she already being drawn into a web from which there was no escape? Little did Sarah know, the most shocking secret of all had yet to surface. Someone close to Weber, someone unsuspected, had been manipulating events from the shadows, and the revelation would shake South Africa to its core. The race for the truth had begun. And in the shadows, the killer was smiling. The first rays of dawn barely touched Hillcrest Estate when Detective Sarah Nkosi returned, determined to uncover the threads of Weber's private life. While the media focused on political rivals and business dealings, Sarah knew that murders of this magnitude often had roots in intimate spaces: family, trusted aides, even lovers. And Jonathan Weber's family was a labyrinth of secrets waiting to be untangled. Eliza Weber, Jonathan's wife, had agreed to meet Sarah privately in the study once more. Her expression was carefully composed, but her hands betrayed tension, trembling slightly as she poured coffee into delicate cups. "Detective, I feel like I've lived a lifetime in a single night," Eliza said softly. Her voice carried a sadness that seemed too controlled, too rehearsed. "Jonathan, he wasn't perfect. He had secrets. But I never thought someone would kill him." Sarah studied her carefully. "Mrs. Weber, I need to know everything, no matter how uncomfortable. Were there tensions between you and Jonathan? Between Jonathan and his children?" Eliza hesitated, staring at the steaming cup. Finally, she spoke. "Our son, Marcus, he's a complicated boy. Bright, ambitious, but reckless. He disagreed with almost everything his father did politically. And he's been involved with some questionable associates. I warned Jonathan, but he never listened." Sarah's brow furrowed. Marcus Weber, Jonathan's only child, had a reputation for being fiery and brash. Yet could a son kill his own father? It seemed unthinkable, but in her experience, unthinkable often hid uncomfortable truths. She pressed further. "Any recent arguments? Any fights that got out of hand?" Eliza shook her head, but her lips pressed tightly together betrayed her uncertainty. Nothing that should have led to murder. But there were moments. Moments when I saw him fearful. Not of enemies outside, but of someone inside his home. Someone he trusted. I never asked who. Perhaps I should have. The weight of the confession hung in the air. Sarah knew one thing for certain: the killer had intimate knowledge of Hillcrest Estate. They knew when and where Weber would be vulnerable. This wasn't a random attack, it was planned meticulously. To uncover more, Sarah requested to speak with Marcus. She found him in a small, dimly lit cafe downtown, nursing a cappuccino far too large for his nerves. "Detective Nkosi," he greeted, attempting casual nonchalance. "I assume you're here about my father?" "Yes, Marcus," she replied. "I need honesty. Did you or anyone close to you have conflicts with Jonathan that could have led to this?" Marcus's expression hardened. Look, we argued. He was controlling, obsessed with appearances and politics. I disagreed with him often. But murder? I would never. His voice cracked, betraying more than his words. Sarah leaned forward. Then why do others believe you had motive? You were his heir, his son, poised to inherit influence and wealth. Some people see that as temptation strong enough to kill for. Marcus flinched. You think I'm capable of that? My father, yes, he was ruthless. But I respected him too much to. His words trailed off. Sarah noticed the tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers tapped nervously against the table. And then came the revelation that chilled her to the bone. Marcus lowered his voice. There's someone else, someone who hated him more than anyone. Someone close to us, who wanted control. And I think they acted while my father was distracted. Sarah's pulse quickened. She had suspected betrayal, but now she had a lead that connected family, trust, and motive. Whoever killed Weber had not only the means and opportunity, they had intimate access. Back at the estate, Sarah turned her attention to Weber's house staff. There were whispers among them, small clues about strange late-night visitors, unexplained phone calls, and locked rooms no one was allowed to enter. One maid, Namsa, finally spoke up, trembling. Detective, I saw someone leaving the house that night, she confessed. Tall man, dark jacket, not a stranger. I think he was one of the family's friends. I can't say more. Sarah pressed. You can tell me. It's important. Any detail could help. Namsa shook her head, eyes wide. I'm scared, but he had a familiar ring on his finger. Like the family's signet ring. Please, you must be careful. The detective's mind raced. A family friend? Someone trusted enough to enter without suspicion? It fit the pattern, intimate knowledge, access to the estate, and motive to remove Jonathan Weber from the picture. And then came the scandalous twist, the one Sarah hadn't anticipated. Forensic reports from Weber's study revealed a shocking detail. Traces of poison were found on the tea he had sipped just hours before the murder. Combined with the bullet wound, this wasn't just a crime of passion, it was premeditated and layered. The killer had wanted to ensure Jonathan Weber's death, using multiple methods to guarantee the outcome. Sarah now realized something frightening. The killer wasn't just seeking revenge. They were sending a message, and the complexity suggested someone with intelligence, planning, and ruthlessness, a mastermind who was likely still very close to the family. As she pieced together the evidence, Sarah's phone buzzed. It was an anonymous tip. Look closer at those who smile too easily. The betrayal is blood deep. Sarah didn't need more hints. She knew one thing, the killer was someone who had been weaving their plans long before Jonathan Weber's death. And the revelation would shock everyone, not just South Africa, but the political elite who had underestimated the deadly reach of betrayal within the walls of Hillcrest Estate. By nightfall, she had a name on her list, a person so close to the family that the nation would never believe their involvement. And in the shadows, the killer watched, aware that the detective was closing in. The game had only just begun. The city of Pretoria hummed with whispers of intrigue as news of Jonathan Weber's murder continued to dominate headlines. The political elite, normally skilled at public composure, were now acting like cornered animals. Alliances shifted with every rumor, and behind closed doors, fingers pointed and trust evaporated like mist in the early morning sun. Detective Sarah Nkosi knew that to solve Weber's murder, she had to confront the world he navigated every day, the treacherous corridors of South African politics, where ambition often outweighed loyalty, and power was worth killing for. Her first visit was to the Parliament building, an imposing structure that carried both authority and intimidation. Inside, the tension was palpable. Ministers spoke in hushed tones, glancing nervously at their colleagues as though Weber's death had broken some invisible barrier of safety. Sarah's eyes scanned the crowd, noting two names that came up repeatedly, Minister Clausen, the stoic politician who had clashed openly with Weber over policy, and Damian Lew, the ambitious young MP whose confrontations with Weber had been no secret. Both had motive, opportunity, and influence, the perfect ingredients for political assassination. She decided to meet Clausen first. His office was sleek, modern, and intimidating, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Clausen stood when she entered, his expression unreadable. Detective Nkosi, he said smoothly. I assume this visit is regarding my late colleague, Jonathan Weber? Yes, she replied, her tone deliberate. Minister Clausen, there are questions about your recent disagreements with Mr. Weber. Can you account for your movements on the night of his murder? Clausen's eyes flickered for the briefest moment, a detail Sarah noted. I was at home with my family, he said. I had no reason to harm him. Our disagreements were professional, yes, but I operate within the law, detective. Murder is not my method. Sarah leaned forward, her gaze sharp. And yet, you had motive. Political disagreements, potential financial disputes, anyone could say the same about you. But what about the alliances that Jonathan Weber had? Did you know he was planning a deal that would shift political power significantly? Clausen's face remained calm, but the subtle tightening around his eyes betrayed concern. I heard whispers. Weber was ambitious, yes. Dangerous even. But to suggest I had a hand in his murder, he stopped, visibly struggling to maintain composure. Sarah left his office with a sense of unease. Clausen's alibi seemed airtight, but the tension she observed was unmistakable. She made a mental note, sometimes the most innocent faces conceal the deepest ambitions. Her next meeting was with Damian Liu, whose fiery rhetoric had made him both a target and a provocateur in recent months. Damian's office was smaller, cluttered with policy papers and campaign materials. He greeted her with a mix of defensiveness and irritation. "Detective, I have nothing to hide," he said, pacing. "Yes, I disagreed with Jonathan Weber publicly, but murder? This is absurd. Politics is about debate, not bullets." "Debate can escalate, Mr. Liu," Sarah replied. "Especially when someone stands to gain from the elimination of a rival. Did you know of any threats against Weber? Did anyone approach you, suggest action, anything?" Damian froze, then shook his head. "No, but you don't understand. Weber had secrets. Powerful people who were angry with him. If you want to solve this, look beyond me. Look at the hidden deals, the offshore accounts, the investors. Jonathan Weber's enemies aren't just in politics, they're everywhere." Sarah's instincts told her Damian's anger was real, but his warning was critical. The murder was bigger than personal grudges, it involved corruption, foreign interests, and alliances that reached far beyond what anyone wanted to admit. Determined to uncover the truth, Sarah began cross-referencing Weber's meetings and communications. She discovered a series of clandestine gatherings with businessmen, lobbyists, and even foreign officials, meetings that were never publicly disclosed. Weber had been working on something explosive, something that threatened to expose corruption on a scale that could shake the entire government. And then she found a startling connection. One of Weber's secret associates, Victor Malangu, a wealthy businessman with ties to both political parties and international investors, had been in Pretoria on the night of the murder. Victor's alibi was weak, and the detective discovered messages between him and Weber discussing eliminating threats and keeping certain truths buried. Sarah realized the danger extended beyond Weber's political life. Whoever killed him had not only targeted him, they were attempting to control the narrative, manipulate power, and possibly silence others who knew too much. But it wasn't just Weber's enemies outside the family who were involved. Evidence was beginning to point inward, toward his inner circle. Peter van der Merwe, the loyal aide, had been unusually evasive, and there were subtle inconsistencies in the timeline he provided. Was he hiding knowledge, or was he actively complicit? As the pieces began to come together, Sarah received another anonymous tip, a photo of a recent secret meeting between Weber, Victor Malangu, and Damian Liu, taken in the shadows of an unmarked office. The photo revealed Weber seated at a table, looking tense, while Victor and Damian leaned in, speaking in low tones. Sarah's heart sank. If these three had conspired in any way, then the murder was not just a crime of passion or political rivalry, it was a premeditated power play, orchestrated by those who wanted control at any cost. And then came the bombshell. Forensic evidence showed that the bullet that killed Weber had traces of an unusual compound, a chemical that could only be sourced through specialized channels. Someone with high-level connections, access, and knowledge had manufactured a killing designed to leave almost no trace. Sarah realized the magnitude of what she was facing. This was no ordinary murder. It was a calculated act, a convergence of politics, corruption, and betrayal, designed to manipulate the very structure of power in South Africa. By nightfall, the city was abuzz with speculation. News outlets debated whether Weber's death was politically motivated, and whispers of scandalous alliances circulated through social media. But Sarah had a private understanding, she was closing in on the truth. Someone powerful had orchestrated this murder, and the threads of the conspiracy were tangled in every corner of Weber's life, family, aides, business, and politics. And in the shadows, the architects of this crime watched carefully, confident that the game was still theirs to control. But Detective Nkosi was relentless, and with each passing hour, she drew closer to exposing the secrets that many wanted buried forever. The murder of Jonathan Weber was no longer just about one man. It had become a dangerous dance of ambition, deception, and deadly consequences, and the next revelation would shock the nation. Detective Sarah Nkosi had long known that politics rarely existed in isolation. Power often walked hand in hand with greed, secrecy, and danger. But even she was unprepared for the depths Jonathan Webber had plunged into, and the shadows that now threatened to engulf everyone connected to him. The investigation had begun to reveal an unsettling pattern. Webber had not only enemies in Parliament and ambitious rivals within his family but also secret ties to Pretoria's underworld. At first glance, the connection seemed incongruous. How could a powerful politician, educated, articulate, and publicly upright, be linked to criminal networks? But as Sarah dug deeper, the lines blurred, revealing a world of illicit deals, shadow investments, and dangerous alliances. It began with Victor Malangu, the businessman whose subtle influence in Parliament had already raised red flags. Sarah discovered Victor's financial empire was entangled with offshore accounts, shell companies, and, disturbingly, known criminal intermediaries. Victor's ability to manipulate both political and criminal elements suggested he was the link between Webber's public life and the hidden dangers that lurked beyond the law. A meeting with an informant known only as Mamba provided the first concrete clue. The informant, a former operative in Pretoria's underground network, revealed that Webber had recently been in contact with a notorious syndicate involved in illegal property acquisitions, money laundering, and political bribery. Jonathan Webber, Mamba whispered, eyes darting nervously, was trying to play both sides. He had one foot in politics and the other in business that could ruin him if anyone found out. He made deals with the wrong people. People who do not forgive mistakes. Sarah shivered. Mistakes in Webber's world weren't forgiven, they were eliminated. The detective's next step was to examine the syndicate's communications. One encrypted message stood out, a plan to neutralize a threat within the political sphere. The language was vague, yet the timing coincided precisely with Webber's last known activities. Someone had orchestrated the murder with insider knowledge, coordinating the political and criminal elements in tandem. The question was obvious: who was that someone? Sarah's attention turned to Webber's inner circle. Peter van der Merwe's evasiveness became increasingly suspicious. A review of his emails and phone records revealed encrypted conversations with an unknown contact, communications that stopped abruptly the night of Webber's murder. Was Peter a participant, or merely a pawn? Then came a shocking revelation. Webber had been negotiating a high-stakes property deal with foreign investors, dealings that Victor Malangu had been overseeing. The investment was supposed to bring billions into the country, but it also exposed financial fraud and hidden corruption. Webber had discovered irregularities, and someone had realized that if he exposed the truth, their power would crumble. Even more troubling was evidence that Webber had received threats from an unknown entity. A burnt envelope recovered from his study contained cryptic messages: "Stop digging, or you pay the ultimate price." The messages suggested that Webber's murder had not been impulsive, it was a calculated move designed to silence him before he could reveal secrets that could topple not only political careers but entire business empires. Sarah knew that she was not only uncovering a murder but also a conspiracy stretching from Parliament to the underworld. The implications were staggering: politicians, businessmen, and criminals, all intersecting in a deadly web where loyalty was currency, and betrayal was fatal. As she examined the evidence, another startling fact emerged. Surveillance footage from the night of the murder showed a vehicle parked near Hillcrest Estate, a black SUV with tinted windows. Witnesses reported seeing a man exit the vehicle, moving confidently as if he belonged there. The man's face was obscured, but the gait, posture, and even the way he held himself suggested training and precision. This was no amateur. This was a professional. Sarah's instinct screamed that the assassin had ties to both Webber's political enemies and the criminal underworld. Someone had orchestrated the murder with chilling expertise, blending influence, secrecy, and lethal intent. But the investigation took an unexpected turn when Sarah traced financial transactions linked to Victor Malangu and Webber. Large sums had been withdrawn from shell accounts days before the murder, and suspicious deposits had been made to unknown recipients. The money trail hinted at bribery, manipulation, and possibly payments to those who carried out Webber's killing. The more Sarah uncovered, the clearer it became: Webber's death was not just about personal ambition or family betrayal, it was about control. Control over resources, political power, and secrets that could destroy reputations. Then came the most shocking discovery yet. Among Webber's private files was a hidden ledger documenting meetings, bribes, and alliances that he had kept secret for years. The ledger contained names of high-ranking politicians, corporate executives, and even law enforcement officials. Each entry hinted at corruption, each meeting whispered of power deals, and each bribe suggested someone was willing to kill to protect it. Sarah realized that the murder was a message, intended not only to silence Webber but to intimidate anyone who might uncover the truth. The underworld and the political elite were united in a delicate, dangerous dance, and anyone who stepped out of line risked death. As the day ended, Sarah sat alone in her office, the ledger spread before her. She understood that her investigation had placed her at the intersection of deadly power and ruthless greed. Every lead, every clue, brought her closer to the truth, and simultaneously deeper into danger. And somewhere in Pretoria, the people behind Weber's murder were watching. They knew that the detective was close. They knew that the Underworld's connections, their hidden alliances, and their carefully orchestrated plans were beginning to unravel. For Sarah Nkosi, the message was clear: she had to move quickly. The Underworld was ruthless, the politicians were cunning, and Weber's murder was only the opening act in a drama that threatened to engulf everyone in its path. The stakes had never been higher, and the next revelation would be more dangerous, more scandalous, and more shocking than anything she had uncovered so far. The shadows were closing in, and the Underworld was just the beginning. Detective Sarah Nkosi leaned back in her chair, exhausted but alert. Weeks of relentless investigation had uncovered political rivalries, criminal alliances, and clandestine financial dealings, but the most dangerous revelations often hit closest to home. And in Jonathan Weber's case, Sarah now suspected that the ultimate betrayal was far more personal than anyone could imagine. The first breakthrough came when Sarah returned to Hillcrest Estate to re-interview the household staff. The maid Namsa, nervous but determined, revealed a detail she had kept hidden until now. "Detective, it's about Peter," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder as if afraid someone was listening. He wasn't always loyal. Sometimes, he would take calls at night. Secret calls. I don't know who he spoke to, but I know he knew more than he let on. And I think he was angry at Jonathan recently. Very angry. Sarah's pulse quickened. Peter van der Merwe had always appeared to be the devoted aide, the loyal right-hand man. But loyalty in Weber's world was rarely absolute. The detective requested access to Peter's phone records, discovering encrypted messages that pointed to an unknown contact, someone with deep influence over both the political and criminal spheres. Sarah now had to confront Peter directly. She found him at a quiet cafe, attempting a facade of calm composure. "Mr. van der Merwe," she began, "you've been less than honest. Who were you communicating with in the days leading up to Jonathan Weber's death?" Peter's eyes flickered with unease. I can't say," he muttered, voice low. "It's not my place. There are people, powerful people. I was just following orders." "Orders?" Sarah pressed. "From whom?" Peter hesitated. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said something that made Sarah's blood run cold. "From someone in this family." Sarah's mind raced. Family betrayal was one of the most devastating motives, and she realized that this could be the missing piece connecting personal grudges, political ambition, and criminal influence. She needed answers fast. The next morning, Sarah returned to Hillcrest Estate under the guise of gathering further evidence. She asked Eliza Weber to join her in the study, ostensibly to clarify family details. Eliza's demeanor was composed, but Sarah noticed a faint tension in her jaw and a flicker of fear in her eyes. "Mrs. Weber," Sarah began, "did Peter ever express dissatisfaction or frustration with your husband? Any argument, any secret alliance, anything unusual?" Eliza's face paled slightly. He was loyal, yes. But sometimes, I thought he was too loyal. I worried he might cross lines if pushed. But I never imagined," she trailed off, swallowing hard. Sarah decided to probe further, carefully, noting each reaction. "Mrs. Weber, is there anyone in this household, anyone who might have wanted Jonathan dead? Someone close enough to plan this without suspicion?" Eliza's eyes filled with tears. "You think it could be Marcus?" she asked softly. "Or me?" Sarah didn't answer immediately. Instead, she observed Eliza's subtle movements, the way her fingers trembled, the way her gaze avoided direct contact. Something about her behavior screamed that she was hiding something, but Sarah couldn't yet discern if it was fear, guilt, or knowledge of a deeper conspiracy. The breakthrough came when Sarah examined Weber's private journals, hidden behind a false panel in his study. Among pages detailing political strategy, financial deals, and secret meetings, she discovered a series of entries that suggested Weber suspected betrayal from within his own household. One note, dated just days before his murder, read, "I can't trust anyone completely. Peter seems loyal, but I sense something shifting. Eliza knows more than she admits. If I'm gone, the truth dies with me." The detective felt a chill. Weber had anticipated betrayal, but by whom? The investigation took a dramatic turn when forensic analysis revealed that the poison found in Weber's tea had traces of a rare sedative, commonly used in medical procedures but difficult to obtain without specialized access. Only someone close to the household or with connections to a medical professional could have administered it without detection. Sarah began questioning household staff and associates, carefully tracking movements on the night of the murder. The evidence began to form a terrifying pattern. Someone in the household, aware of Weber's routines and access, had coordinated with external forces to ensure his death. And then came the most shocking revelation. Financial records showed large transfers from the Weber family accounts to unknown recipients in the days leading up to the murder. The amounts were substantial, and the timing suspicious. Sarah realized someone in the family, trusted, intimate, and unassuming, was facilitating secret dealings, possibly even collaborating with the political and criminal players she had been tracking. Marcus Weber's behavior became increasingly suspicious. Despite his public grief, he had been seen meeting privately with figures connected to Victor Malangu and Damian Liu. Was he merely curious or complicit? Sarah confronted him again. Marcus's facade cracked under scrutiny. Yes, he admitted finally, voice trembling. I knew about some things my father was hiding. But I didn't kill him. I swear I didn't. Yet the detective couldn't ignore the subtle signs of involvement, secret meetings, financial anomalies, and private communications. She realized that the betrayal extended beyond a simple grudge. It was a carefully orchestrated manipulation, involving family, aides, and shadowy allies, an intricate web designed to control Weber's fate and ensure no one could uncover the full truth. As Sarah pieced together the strands of betrayal, the anonymous tipster called again. The dagger is closest where the heart lies. Trust no one. Sarah knew the truth was perilously close, but so was danger. The murderer was someone intimate, cunning, and unafraid. Every step forward could bring her closer to uncovering the killer, and every misstep could make her the next target. By nightfall, the detective's office was littered with evidence, photos, and timelines. The connections were clear. Family members, loyal aides, political rivals, and criminal networks had converged in a deadly alliance, each playing a role in the murder of Jonathan Weber. And somewhere, the mastermind watched. Patient. Calculating. Confident that the web of betrayal would conceal them forever. But Sarah Nkosi was relentless. And the closer she got to the heart of the conspiracy, the more dangerous her path became. Detective Sarah Nkosi had been chasing shadows for weeks. Political rivalries, criminal connections, and family betrayals had formed a complex maze, but she had learned that in cases like Jonathan Weber's, the truth often hides behind the most unexpected figure, someone who appeared loyal, trustworthy, and untouchable. It was late one evening when Sarah received an anonymous tip that finally sent chills down her spine. The message was short, almost taunting. The one who pulls the strings wears the mask of innocence. Look closely at those who guide the king. Her mind raced. Who could this be? Her list of suspects had narrowed over time: Peter van der Merwe, Marcus Weber, Victor Malangu, but the tip implied something she hadn't yet considered, a mastermind who had been orchestrating the events from the shadows, someone above suspicion, someone no one would dare accuse. Sarah returned to Hillcrest Estate, poring over Weber's private journals, emails, and financial records. That's when she noticed a pattern she had missed before: subtle, almost imperceptible instructions embedded in Weber's correspondence, apparently ignored by him at the time. The handwriting and phrasing matched Eliza Weber's style. Sarah's heart skipped. Could Jonathan Weber's wife, the woman who had appeared grieving and composed, have been the architect of his murder? It seemed unthinkable. But the evidence was mounting. Financial transfers had passed through her accounts, unexplained meetings coincided with critical events, and her subtle influence had been present in almost every major decision Jonathan made in the weeks before his death. To confront Eliza, Sarah arranged a private meeting under the pretense of following up on household inconsistencies. The tension was palpable as Eliza greeted her with a courteous smile, one that did not reach her eyes. "Detective Nkosi," Eliza said softly, "I hope you've found some answers." "I have," Sarah replied, holding her gaze. "Answers that lead to a disturbing possibility." "Mrs. Weber, were you involved in orchestrating Jonathan's murder?" Eliza's composure remained unerringly intact. For a moment, she said nothing, letting the silence stretch, forcing Sarah to confront her own assumptions. Then, finally, Eliza spoke, her voice low and measured. "I loved Jonathan, but love is not always enough. He threatened everything I've worked for, everything we've built. He was reckless, dangerous. And when I realized he would ruin us all, I made a choice." Sarah's mind reeled. She had suspected betrayal, but the mastermind being Weber's own wife was both shocking and tragic. Eliza continued, "I didn't act alone. Peter helped. Victor helped. Even Marcus, he didn't want blood on his hands, but he wanted the power that comes after. Jonathan's death, it was inevitable." The confession was methodical, almost cold. Eliza had planned with precision, sedative in the tea, timed bullet wound, coordination with political and criminal players. Each step designed to ensure Weber's death while protecting herself and her family. Sarah realized the scandal was bigger than she had imagined. Not only had Jonathan Weber been betrayed by those closest to him, but his death had also been a meticulously orchestrated political and financial maneuver, a coup orchestrated from within his own household. And yet, even in this revelation, Sarah sensed there was more. Eliza's careful phrasing suggested a hidden layer, something she had not admitted. Sarah pressed. Why leave the note pinned to his chest? The message, truth has its price. Who was that for? Eliza's eyes hardened. For the world. For those who think power is untouchable. For those who would challenge us. That note, it was a warning. And a confession, if anyone were clever enough to see it. Sarah felt the weight of the enormity of the crime. Eliza had orchestrated not just a murder, but a scandal that implicated politicians, criminals, and even her own family in one audacious act. It was the kind of betrayal that would haunt the nation for years. But there was one final, devastating twist. As Sarah reviewed Weber's journal entries and cross-referenced recent meetings, she discovered a shocking detail. Eliza had been working with someone outside the family, someone no one had suspected. A shadowy figure, one whose influence reached into politics, business, and even law enforcement. The detective pieced together the puzzle. The mastermind behind Jonathan Weber's death was not acting alone. Eliza had manipulated allies, coerced accomplices, and coordinated with a powerful external force, someone who had a vested interest in Weber's silence and his demise. Sarah now understood the chilling truth. Weber's murder had been a masterstroke of deception. Betrayal, manipulation, and ambition had converged, and the full scope of the conspiracy remained dangerously alive. The killer, orchestrator, and enablers were still at large. And each one had something to lose if Sarah exposed them. As the night deepened, Sarah sat alone in the study, staring at the pieces of evidence spread before her. She realized the battle was far from over. The shadow behind the throne was still moving, still powerful, and still capable of stopping anyone who threatened to reveal the truth. And in the darkness, the orchestrator watched, confident that even the detective was still several moves behind. Sarah knew one thing with absolute certainty: exposing Eliza was just the beginning. To uncover the full conspiracy, she would need to navigate a minefield of greed, deception, and murder. One wrong step could make her the next target. Jonathan Weber's death had been a message. And now, Sarah Nkosi was determined to ensure the world read it, no matter the cost. Detective Sarah Nkosi had spent weeks peeling back layers of lies, betrayal, and deadly ambition. Each revelation drew her closer to the truth, but the deeper she delved, the more dangerous her investigation became. Jonathan Weber's murder was no isolated act. It was a carefully orchestrated conspiracy, one that spanned family, politics, business, and the criminal underworld. The breakthrough came when Sarah traced financial transactions from Eliza Weber's hidden accounts. Large sums had flowed to offshore entities, shell companies, and unknown recipients, all leading to a single enigmatic figure, Leonard Voss, a shadowy power broker with influence over politicians, businessmen, and even criminal networks. He was the missing link, the unseen hand behind the conspiracy. Leonard Voss was a man whose name rarely appeared in public records. Yet those who had crossed him whispered of his ruthlessness and his uncanny ability to manipulate events from behind the scenes. He had a reputation for controlling outcomes without leaving fingerprints, a puppeteer who ensured others did the dirty work. Sarah's next step was to dig into Leonard Voss's background. She discovered he had long-term ties with Victor Malangu, and together they had orchestrated lucrative deals that benefited from Weber's silence. Weber had uncovered their plans and threatened to expose them. The murder, Sarah realized, was the only way they could protect their empire. The detective arranged a covert meeting with one of Voss's former associates, who agreed to speak only under strict anonymity. The man, visibly shaken, revealed shocking details. Jonathan Weber was dangerous to them, the informant said. He knew too much about offshore deals, corrupt politicians, and illegal acquisitions. Eliza? She was there inside. She made sure the timing was perfect. Peter and Marcus were just pieces on the chessboard. The plan, it was flawless. Sarah felt a chill. The conspiracy was more intricate than she had imagined. Weber's wife orchestrated the murder with inside knowledge, aided by family members and manipulated by an external mastermind. Every move, every detail, had been anticipated and exploited. She now had evidence of collusion between Leonard Voss, Victor Malangu, Damian Liu, and Eliza Weber. They had coordinated to eliminate Weber while maintaining plausible deniability. Even forensic anomalies, like the rare sedative in Weber's tea, had been engineered to suggest an external threat rather than a household betrayal. But the revelation that shook her most was a hidden meeting recorded in Weber's journal. Days before his death, Weber had met secretly with a whistleblower, someone who had attempted to expose Voss and Malungu. The note suggested Weber planned to confront Voss directly, a confrontation that likely sealed his fate. Sarah realized she was now facing a conspiracy that went far beyond a single murder. Weber's death had been the opening act of a larger plan to consolidate power, manipulate politics, and silence anyone who threatened Voss's empire. The detective's strategy became clear. To expose the full conspiracy, she would need irrefutable proof linking all parties: Eliza, Peter, Marcus, Voss, Malungu, and Damian Liu. She meticulously mapped connections, cross-referencing communications, financial records, and surveillance footage. Every thread of the web pointed to one conclusion: Weber's death was not just a murder, it was a calculated coup. The danger, however, was immediate. Voss had influence over law enforcement, political allies, and underworld operatives. Any misstep could alert him and place Sarah directly in harm's way. She knew she needed a bold plan to outmaneuver him. Her first move was to confront Victor Malungu with the evidence she had gathered. Sarah arranged a meeting at a public location, carefully chosen to ensure safety and record the conversation. Malungu arrived, his usual composure replaced with a subtle tension that only confirmed his guilt. "Detective Nkosi," Malungu said smoothly, "what makes you think you understand what happened?" "I've traced financial transfers, communications, and secret meetings," Sarah replied, her tone calm but unwavering. "I know about the coordination between you, Voss, Damian Liu, and Eliza Weber. I know the sedative, the bullet, and the manipulation. The conspiracy is unraveling, and I have evidence." Malungu's eyes narrowed. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. Voss is untouchable. Eliza, she is smarter than you realize. You're treading dangerous ground." Sarah didn't flinch. "Dangerous or not, this ends. Weber's death will not be in vain. The world will know the truth." Malungu smiled thinly, almost admiringly. "We'll see, detective. We'll see." Leaving the meeting, Sarah realized the stakes were higher than ever. Leonard Voss was not just a hidden mastermind, he was a man who could manipulate justice itself. Exposing him would require precision, courage, and an unyielding will to confront corruption at the highest levels. That night, reviewing her notes, Sarah pieced together the final strands of the conspiracy. Leonard Voss had manipulated Weber's death to protect his empire, using Eliza as the instrument of betrayal. Victor Malungu had facilitated financial and political maneuvering, while Damian Liu had applied political pressure to obscure the truth. Peter van der Merwe and Marcus Weber had been pawns, unknowingly aiding the orchestration, while the note pinned to Weber's chest served as a psychological message to both the public and the conspirators themselves. Sarah's final thought before leaving the office was stark and chilling: Jonathan Weber's murder was only the beginning. Exposing the conspiracy would shake the nation, destroy reputations, and make powerful enemies. And the mastermind, Leonard Voss, was already planning his next move. The game had entered its final stage. And in the shadows, the true power behind Weber's death prepared for the reckoning, confident that no one could stop him. But Sarah Nkosi had already begun to outmaneuver him. The conspiracy was unraveling. And soon, every lie, every betrayal, and every secret would come to light. The city of Pretoria had never felt more tense. Whispers of scandal rippled through Parliament, media outlets buzzed with speculation, and citizens debated heatedly about the murder of Jonathan Weber. But Detective Sarah Nkosi knew the real storm had not yet hit. The truth was about to explode in a way that would shake the foundations of power, influence, and trust. Sarah had spent countless sleepless nights piecing together the intricate puzzle. Every financial transaction, every secret meeting, every cryptic communication had led her to one undeniable conclusion: the conspiracy behind Weber's murder involved the perfect storm of ambition, greed, and betrayal. And now, armed with irrefutable evidence, she was ready to confront the conspirators. Her first move was strategic. A coordinated operation with trusted law enforcement officers was arranged to simultaneously apprehend the key players: Leonard Voss, Victor Malungu, Damian Liu, and Eliza Weber. Sarah knew that once the arrests became public, the ripple effects would be unprecedented. The first arrest was Victor Malungu. Sarah and her team intercepted him at a luxury hotel, where he had been finalizing deals linked to Weber's murder. The evidence was overwhelming: bank records, communications with Voss, and witness testimonies that left him with no room to maneuver. Malungu was taken into custody quietly, his usual arrogance replaced with a subtle unease. Next, Damian Liu was confronted in Parliament. The young MP had been vocal about Weber's alleged misconduct, but behind closed doors, he had facilitated political pressure and manipulations that obscured the truth. Faced with Sarah's meticulously compiled evidence, Lou's confidence crumbled, and he too was placed under arrest. The most challenging confrontation awaited Sarah, Eliza Weber. The woman who had orchestrated the murder from within the household, manipulating family, aides, and criminal networks alike, remained composed as ever. Eliza was brought in for questioning. Sarah could see the calculated calm in her eyes, a mask that had deceived everyone for weeks. "Mrs. Weber," Sarah began, placing the evidence on the table, "we have bank records, communications, and witness accounts. The conspiracy is clear. Your role is undeniable." Eliza's response was chilling in its composure. "Detective, I did what I had to do. Jonathan was a threat, to the family, to our future, to everything I've built. You may have evidence, but you'll never understand the necessity of my actions." Sarah felt a mixture of disgust and fascination. The mastermind behind the murder, the person who had orchestrated every detail with precision, displayed not fear but conviction. The final piece was Leonard Voss. Using the evidence collected from financial trails, encrypted messages, and witness statements, Sarah coordinated with a national task force to apprehend him at one of his private estates. Voss, the man who had pulled the strings from the shadows, was caught off guard. His empire of influence, corruption, and manipulation began to unravel with a single chain of arrests. Public exposure of the conspiracy was inevitable. News outlets ran headlines revealing the shocking collusion, Weber's wife as the mastermind, the involvement of a shadowy power broker, and the orchestration of murder, corruption, and betrayal at the highest levels. The nation reacted with disbelief, outrage, and fascination. Sarah Nkosi watched as the pieces fell into place. The arrest of Eliza Weber, Malungu, Lou, and Voss marked the culmination of months of meticulous investigation. Yet, she knew the true reckoning extended beyond legal consequences. The scandal would haunt the political elite, the business world, and even the criminal underworld for years. There was one final, dramatic twist. During interrogation, a hidden ledger recovered from Voss's estate revealed that Weber's murder had been planned even further in advance than anyone had realized. Years of manipulation, blackmail, and coercion had been meticulously executed, ensuring that Weber's death would benefit multiple parties and obscure any direct motive. Sarah's jaw tightened as she read the ledger. The conspiracy was almost flawless, until she intervened. And now, the full weight of its implications was on the public stage. The trial that followed was explosive. Testimonies revealed the chilling precision with which Weber's murder had been orchestrated, exposing decades of corruption, hidden alliances, and betrayal. Eliza Weber's calm demeanor in court contrasted sharply with the outrage of the public and the disbelief of Weber's colleagues. In the courtroom, Victor Malungu, Damien Lou, and Leonard Voss were held accountable for their roles in the conspiracy, each facing charges that combined murder, corruption, and organized crime. Yet, for Sarah, the most haunting realization was personal. The murder of Jonathan Weber had been a cautionary tale about trust, power, and the human capacity for deception. The web of betrayal had been vast, but her relentless pursuit of truth had dismantled it, piece by piece. As the sun set over Pretoria, Sarah reflected on the journey. Justice had been served, but the echoes of Weber's murder would resonate for years. And though the mastermind and her accomplices had been exposed, the scars of betrayal, political, personal, and societal, remained. Jonathan Weber's death had been shocking, scandalous, and controversial. But through courage, meticulous investigation, and unwavering resolve, Detective Sarah Nkosi had ensured that the truth would no longer be buried in shadows. The city breathed, cautiously, aware that the consequences of ambition, greed, and betrayal had been revealed, and that justice, though delayed, had ultimately prevailed. The storm had passed, but Pretoria was forever changed. Jonathan Weber's murder had revealed a web of betrayal that reached into the highest echelons of power, family loyalty, and criminal enterprise. The nation watched in stunned silence as the scandal unraveled, the magnitude of the conspiracy cementing Weber's place in history as South Africa's most controversial political figure. Detective Sarah Nkosi had been at the center of it all. Her relentless investigation had exposed the shocking truth: Eliza Weber as the mastermind, Leonard Voss as the shadowy orchestrator, Victor Malungu and Damien Lou as collaborators, and the complicity of family members who had been manipulated or coerced. Every layer had been meticulously dismantled, revealing the staggering depth of ambition, greed, and deception. Public reaction was explosive. Media outlets ran daily analyses of Weber's life, the murder, and the scandalous conspiracy. Editorials debated the morality of Eliza Weber's actions, questioning whether love, fear, or ambition had driven her to orchestrate the unthinkable. Citizens debated openly: could someone truly betray a spouse so thoroughly, or had Weber's own ruthlessness sown the seeds of his downfall? In Parliament, the consequences were immediate and profound. Damien Lou's political career was destroyed, Victor Malangu faced financial ruin and criminal prosecution, and Leonard Voss, once untouchable, found himself facing charges that stripped him of power and influence. Lawmakers demanded transparency, resignations, and reform, recognizing that Weber's death had been a grim reminder of how corruption and ambition could intertwine with lethal consequences. For Eliza Weber, the aftermath was deeply personal. The woman who had once presented herself as grieving and composed now faced the full weight of her actions. In court, her calculated demeanor remained, but the evidence of manipulation, murder, and conspiracy left no room for leniency. Her betrayal of Jonathan Weber, her husband, the father of her child, was universally condemned, leaving her isolated, scrutinized, and vilified. Marcus Weber, who had been implicated as a pawn rather than a perpetrator, faced his own reckoning. Though not criminally responsible for his father's death, the public's perception of his involvement in secret meetings and financial dealings damaged his reputation irreparably. The Weber family, once powerful and respected, was left fractured and scarred, a stark reminder that betrayal often comes from the closest quarters. Sarah Nkosi reflected on the journey as she reviewed the evidence one last time. The case had challenged every instinct, every assumption, and every skill she possessed. From the shadows of the underworld to the marble halls of Parliament, from intimate family betrayals to international corruption, Weber's murder had touched every corner of society. Yet, despite the scandal, one truth remained: justice had been served. The conspiracy had been dismantled, the perpetrators held accountable, and the public had been given the transparency that Jonathan Weber's murder had so desperately needed. Still, the lessons lingered. Power, unchecked ambition, and betrayal were potent forces capable of igniting tragedy. Jonathan Weber's life and death served as a cautionary tale, a reminder that influence and trust could be weaponized, and that even those closest to us could harbor deadly intentions. In the final moments of the investigation, Sarah visited Hillcrest Estate one last time. The grand house, once the site of secrets, scheming, and murder, stood silent under the African sunset. The air felt heavy, carrying the echoes of betrayal, ambition, and grief. Walking through the estate, Sarah paused in Jonathan Weber's study, now cleared of secrets and evidence. She looked at the place where a brilliant, controversial, and deeply flawed man had met his end. Despite the scandal, despite the betrayal, Weber's legacy, both political and personal, remained indelibly marked on the country he had served and the people who had been touched by his life and death. As she stepped outside, Sarah knew that the world would never forget the story of Jonathan Weber. His murder had exposed corruption, revealed hidden alliances, and reminded a nation of the dangerous intersection between ambition, power, and trust. And though the conspirators had been brought to justice, the echoes of the scandal would linger for generations, a stark reminder of how close betrayal can strike, even from the ones we love most. Sarah Nkosi walked away from Hillcrest with the satisfaction of truth revealed, but with the quiet acknowledgement that some scars, political, personal, and societal, would never fully heal. The story of Jonathan Weber, South Africa's most controversial politician, was over, but the lessons, the scandal, and the cautionary tale would endure forever.